Hello again, folks. So, could the Brexit just be a huge distraction designed to keep people from focusing on the truth and what really matters in this world? It's quite possible, and I wouldn't be too surprised actually if the whole thing didn't happen and the UK was to remain in the EU. Although it's hard to say exactly what these politicians are going to do with it all, and the ones who tell the politicians what to do, not the public, but the shadow government and all of that. Who knows what they exactly are trying to achieve? And perhaps I sometimes wonder if there's infighting between these factions. There's in the conspiracy theory literature and that side of things. Quite often it's put across that these secret societies and shadow governments are all working together, and they're extremely, although they are extremely organized. I believe there could well be some competition between them as well, and maybe they don't all quite have it together as much as it would seem to be. But of course, they would have to maintain the illusion of control above all else in that regard. But who knows? It could all just be a complete mess behind the scenes here, with none of them really knowing what's going on, and especially when we look at how it's so compartmentalized and all but a very few select at the very, very top of this pyramid would know for sure what's going on, and those would be people that that's when we'd get into the hyperdimensional matrix, which is a talk for another time, and you can check out some of the other talks on my channel and my articles on my website for more information on the hyperdimensional matrix. But just staying on the 3D physical level, yeah, I don't believe they all have it together, and Brexit is a very good example of that. Lots of infighting, and it's all incredibly chaotic, and no one really knows what's going on. And then, meanwhile, it distracts people from life. They're caught up in this circus of like, oh, what's going to happen with this, and instead of maybe focusing on themselves or becoming aware of the dangers of 5G, which is being rolled out very quickly. And smart meters as well, although that also, from what I saw, has become a bit of a shambles. The rollout of the UK of smart meters has failed to reach its targets, although still over 10 million devices have been distributed throughout the UK, which is a lot. They're far off the target that they set of every single home in the UK having one. So yeah, it's all sort of chaotic and up in the air at the moment, but it's important in these times to remain centered in yourself and grounded and embodied, and being aware of the possible outcomes and not getting caught up in the sensationalism as the river of this matrix keeps flowing. It's very easy to get caught up in that. But yeah, so be aware of the bigger picture, and as always, the self-work is where we always make the biggest change. That's where the pivot point in our timeline really lies, is how we work on ourselves, and that in turn has reality creation effects, which affects the collective timeline. So with that, if the Brexit did happen, though, I reckon that would mark the end of the EU. That would begin the beginning of the end, which is also why I think it won't happen, because if the EU starts to go down, then that could very well be the end of the society as we know it. And I'm not sure if it's going to happen just yet. But I predict in between 10 or 15 years, it's going to be, that's it. I mean, 15 years has been quite generous, actually, given this current trend of society. And so, who knows, it could very well be that first domino in a long set of dominoes that really kicks things into gear. But if you look at it, it's actually, there's been a huge game afoot that has been going back hundreds of years, all building up to this point that we are in right now. And it's interesting to think about why is it all coming to this grand end game. Like, what is going to be the end result of this, and why is it all happening now? And it's very interesting to ponder deeply upon that. And again, some of my other talks talk about this. And if you, depending on how deep you'd like to go, if you really want to go as deep as the rabbit hole can possibly go, I'd highly recommend checking out the website Montauk Net. Tom Montalk has some amazing articles on there with some really, really solid research, and I personally found all of the material on there extremely interesting and very valuable. and he talks a lot about the end time events and what could possibly be in the future for humanity. So all the whilst people are distracted with Brexit, we could be focusing and talking about and thinking about things like this, stuff that's really going to change the game. So who knows what it's going to be, folks, but it's going to be one hell of a ride before we get out at the end. But for sure, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else in the universe right now, and if we look at the spiritual side of things and how taking into account reincarnation and all of that, we would have on some level have chosen to be here at this place at this time. And I really could get into that kind of belief. Again, I believe in reincarnation, but the idea that we chose to be here gives room for taking responsibility for being here, and accepting that we would have known the current state of the world and what it was going to turn into. Because obviously, when you die and then you're in that state of being in limbo between incarnations, you would have access to a profoundly far stronger mind and be able to see the probable futures and all of that, and to be able to pick a suitable family to be born into and all that sort of stuff. So if you go down that spiritual line of things, it can really give you some power and in dealing with the situations, instead of playing the victim game, like, oh, this stuff's all happening and I can't do anything about it, blah, 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 why am I here, blah, blah. I really prefer to take the empowering spiritual road on these matters, and that's where I think it's important to have a sort of a wide variety of interests and be able to get a bigger perspective on things and more align yourself with objective truth, because then in situations in the physical world, you are better prepared to handle them, and you understand what's going on a lot better, and that in turn reduces fear and stress, and like I say, gives you more power. And the more power you have, the more reality creation you can have, and the more positive you are, it creates this feedback loop, and you can really start manifesting some awesome things in this reality. Of course, reality creation is a bit more complex and is put out in films like The Secret. There's a few things stuff like that really misses. But yeah, it's important to do a bit more research than just watching The Secret into reality creation. But yeah, see, subjects like this are far more important and interesting. Well, I find them more interesting anyway. Definitely they're more important than being distracted by the Brexit. And just to touch on as an update for the New Zealand shooting, it seems the very clear agenda of banning semi-automatic rifles is now very efficiently being orchestrated, especially with measures being taken into place to stop people rush buying guns. So it's been done incredibly effectively, and unfortunately many New Zealanders are buying into Jacinda Ardern's love preaching, and it's all about love, whilst behind the scenes who knows what she really thinks about all of this, and clearly it's just a puppet for this larger agenda. And in one way this may be kind of hard to say, but perhaps New Zealand needs a bit of a wake-up call and realizing that it's not separate from the world, because being so far away from everything, it seems like they just get into their own bubble. And because I've tried to speak to a few New Zealanders now about how the government might be corrupt and all of this, and it seems very hard for them to grasp that their government may be corrupt. They can understand that the US government's corrupt, and the UK government's corrupt, and the European government's corrupt, but their own government seems to be quite difficult to get their head around. And maybe that's just the select few that I've talked to. Maybe you could find people all over the world who'd have a similar opinion about their own governments, but it's just interesting to think that it could be all over the world, but just not in your country. So that was quite funny to think about that. So I think we'll wrap up this short episode on that note, and just stay focused, folks, and be aware of the tricksters, and focus on your power. Goodbye.